As tensions continue to escalate across West Asia, the region stands at a fragile crossroads with fear of a wider conflict growing by the day. From stalled ceasefire efforts to rising military posturing, the geopolitical stakes have never been higher and the consequences could ripple far beyond the region. To break down the latest developments, I am joined by a former advisor to Benny Gantz, Dr. Sucharewicz, for a live conversation. Thank you so much, ma'am, for making time. And let me straight away begin this conversation by asking you, in your opinion, how long will Israel carry out military operations inside Lebanon? And when and who will decide that the threat from Hezbollah is over?
Well, if I had a crystal ball, I would ask it right now to give you a precise answer. But as you sure understand, here in the Middle East, when it comes to the security threats that Israel is facing, it is always difficult to pinpoint the time dimension. So it is easier and probably also more pragmatic to look at the principles that need to be achieved. And these are really the ones guiding the time dimension. And that principle is clear. Hezbollah has to disarm. Hezbollah has to stop firing at Israel's civilian population in the north. The moment that happens, Israel's military operation in Lebanon will be over. The good news are the Lebanese government, the president, understood this very principle and stands behind it. Now we only have to see it come into action.
Do you think, Dr. Melody, that it's possible to demilitarize Hezbollah? It's a military actor, it's a political actor, it has an intelligence wing, it has got overground workers. So is it really possible to demilitarize a system which has got thousands and thousands of people working?
It's a very good question, and I would see it in the wider context. And that means focusing only on the kinetic demilitarization of Hezbollah probably will not suffice, because as you say, it is entrenched in civilian, in welfare, in financial matters, the entire economical infrastructure in Lebanon. So it really demands a wider strategic approach, but this approach starts with demilitarization, because only like that can Hezbollah no longer take its own populations, whether Christians, also the Shia and Sunni, hostages for a cause that is not Lebanese, that is the Iranian Shia fundamentalist cause. And that has to happen whether through the Lebanese military, whether in the end will have to happen to the Israeli military. But as long as Hezbollah have weapons in their hands, they will continue to terrorize their own people. They will continue to terrorize the Israeli people. And it is simply, for a sovereign state, not acceptable.
Why hasn't de-radicalization worked in West Asia? There have been a lot of military operations, but de-radicalization as a strategy, as a political tool, seems to be missing in the entire gamut of affairs. Your thoughts on that?
It's a very important point, de-radicalization, but it is never so far, when you're dealing with kinetical threats, like, for example, the state of Israel is dealing with, first, you have to have the weapons, the defense system, the aerial defense, and also the resilience among your own population to withstand those threats. But looking, for example, at Gaza, you're absolutely right. If we want to ensure that the October 7th will not happen again, and the people in Gaza, for example, citizens, will not again follow the call of a radical Islamist Hamas jihadist group and making them commit a massacre as they did in the past. For that to happen, we need de-radicalization. We need to ensure that education systems don't teach children to die as a shaheed, to cherish death more than they would like to cherish freedom or possibly even coexistence with their neighbors. And once that is done through the education system, the media, even the urban landscapes, squares in Gaza are named after horrific jihadists who killed small children Jewish children with their bare hands. Once that is established, we can start looking at the future and building prosperity and all the things in this region that so many people are thirsty for. And it's the same with Hezbollah. The kind of radical Islamist ideological threats we are dealing with cannot be talked away, they cannot be wished away. The weapons have to go away, and then we must hope we manage to get the radical ideas out of the majority of the people.
Do you think that this message has been absorbed by Iran that, that they have been able to weaponize Hezbollah, Hamas and Houthis, who were constantly attacking Israel, and Israel was on defensive, that the pain will be felt by them. The war will cross the frontier.
Could you repeat the question, please?
I mean to say that, do you think that the behavior of state of Iran will change, because ultimately the entire military conflict that has taken place or has also arisen out of the fact that Hezbollah, Houthis and Hamas have been directly financed by Iran?
Well, here you're right, of course, but here we back up the ideological component of the equation. And if the Iranian regime's behavior changes, it is for tactical reasons, but as long as the ideology doesn't change, and the ideology says, may the Iranian country burn as long as Islam rules over the world, as long as this principle does not change, the behavior will change only for a short time, which is why we're very, very worried to see again a kind of agreement signed that allows Iran to silently continue to build up again its ballistic forces, its clandestine nuclear activities, the terrorist financing throughout the region, because that would bring us back to the status quo ante, and that really should not happen. We really hope for a change, for a new reality for the people of Iran who deserve it, for the people of Israel, and for the entire region.
A lot of people are saying that instead of the people rising up against the regime, there seems to the war seems to have created some sort of an internal strength for the IRGC. The so-called the mullahs, they have people have become sympathetic. So there was no uprising that was expected. When the conflict started. Your comments on that, ma'am?
I understand from people that are actually very closely related to the Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi, that the potential to mobilize a lot of Iranians to go back to the streets is the same as we saw it several weeks ago before the war started. But it shall not happen as long as there's still just a fragile ceasefire, and as long as those brave Iranian people who take to the streets cannot know for sure that they're not walking into certain death. Meaning, when time is ripe, then the people who can, such as Reza Pahlavi, will call on the Iranian people to take back to the streets and hopefully finish what the American and US armies established the conditions for by degrading the military capabilities of the IRGC, of the Iranian regime, by ensuring that the missile arsenals are harshly reduced, by making sure that missile launchers are destroyed, almost probably 60 to 70%, and by also making sure that nuclear sites can no longer function. So, and the industrial capabilities to reproduce all of those threats just as much.
But here comes the catch, nowhere historically a regime has been changed without putting boots on ground, nowhere. And this has been a pure play aerial campaign. So who's going to verify the fissile material, the buried fissile material? Who's going to verify, if you don't have boots on ground, about the warheads? And if you don't have boots on ground, then it's only a word play. I mean, it's a word. It's a catch-22 situation. I mean, then you got to believe. If they say that, well, we have got 22 warheads, or we have got only 200 kilograms of fissile material, without having boots on ground, you'll have to believe that.
But we do have a quite recent example where a regime fell without boots on the ground, and that is the Assad regime. Or there were boots on the ground, but there were internal boots on the ground. And it took some time, but it did fall. And here as well, hopefully those boots on the ground, symbolically speaking, would be the Iranian people taking to the streets and fighting for their own destiny once the conditions arrive, because we do not want to see once again how 40,000 of those beautiful souls are slaughtered by brutal Basij and IRGC terrorists. You can't call them anything else than that.
But Dr. Melody,
what's important?
But Dr. Melody, on the face of it, it looks that the regime seems to be holding on. The sort of asymmetric. It's a very neutral observation. The sort of asymmetric warfare they waged. The decentralization of command. And the fact that they were able to take so much of force, it looks like that the regime has been able to absorb the first phase of the conflict.
Look, this regime has been building up its terrorist and its offensive infrastructures for the past over 4 decades. And nobody was naive enough to think that this would be the Maduro-like Venezuela operation of coming in and coming out again with the leader in the hand. It was clear that even after 250 of the leaders of this regime have been neutralized through the Israeli and American attacks, of course, there still is a very heavy infrastructure of people that are politicians, that are linked to the IRGC, that are linked to the Basij. But what I hear from people that have their feet and their ears on the ground in Iran is that a lot of the Basij and the IRGC people are starting to think of defecting, are starting to inquire what happens to me once I defect. And I think that here too, Reza Pahlavi has ensured that there is a place for them to go to receive information, and those numbers seem to be growing. And you see people on the internet, former IRGC commanders, with of course anonymous videos saying, we left, we no longer believe in this nihilist messianic ideology. We want to live, we don't want to die. So we do have reason to stay optimistic.
Okay, in context of priority, is the fissile material, the nuclear bomb, tops the list, or is it ballistic missile, or is it regime change, or what is the most important thing in this conflict for Israel right now?
It is the fissile material and it is the ballistic missiles for the very reasons that both together would provide the Iranian regime with the weapon they require to implement their wish, which is wiping Israel off the map. The ballistic missiles, after they had been significantly degraded in the last war in June, Iran started to again rearm, and I think they were back to 3,000 missiles, and there were plans of 8,000 ballistic missiles to be produced within a very short time. Now, this understanding by the intelligence was also one of the reasons why the timing for the US and Israel was so important, because it is not a secret that with such a mass of heavy ballistic long-range missiles, also air defense systems as brilliant and well-functioning as the Arrow 3 or the Iron Dome can be overwhelmed. So that is a deterrent potential for the Iranian regime, which very successfully and timely was now degraded. And the same is of course with a fissile material. We see what is happening there, and we see who the friends are of this regime. It is the Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis. None of us wants to take the risk in this region and beyond, and also in Europe, by the way, and sadly also in India, because we know that their rockets can reach New Delhi already, of dirty bombs landing in the hands of terrorists. So those two threats for Israel, for the region, but bottom line for the entire world, are a priority.
How long will Israel fight? If suppose there is no consensus on this nuclear issue, Americans are saying 20 years, Iranians are saying 5 years, suppose there's a cap of 10 years, will that satisfy Israel?
What's important right now is to keep up the historically strong and intimate coordination between Israel and the US, between the Prime Minister and President Trump, in ensuring that whatever happens now in this war, it is done in a strategic, in a careful, and in a coordinated manner. I would not put my finger and my eye too much on the time dimension. As I said earlier, I would have a look at the actual objectives achieved. A lot of the joint objectives declared have been achieved already. Obviously, ideally, we don't have a time tap on any kind of agreement like we had in the past with the JCPOA. Nobody wants to know that in 10, 20 years, this dangerous regime would be in the position to rearm nuclear in a nuclear manner again. But, and that is a very important but, there are all the reasons to believe that this regime, weakened strategically, economically, militarily, in every possible, and obviously psychologically, chances for it to survive those 10 years and chances for it to continue terrorizing the region by then are not so high. So as long as right now we know the fissile material, the nuclear enrichment, and ballistic missiles are no longer an acute threat to the free world, we are in a much better situation than we were before this war.
And last question before I let go of you. You know, the war cannot go on forever because the sort of the consequence of the war is that Hormuz has been turned into some sort of a toll plaza, and the entire global South is suffering because of it.
Absolutely, and this is something that should be taken very seriously. And of course, also for India, this is it's a major issue. But that is part of the threats emerging from a fundamentalist regime. They will use, whether it's nuclear extortion, whether it's economic extortion of this kind, they will not cease doing that. And this is why it's so important to solve this problem once and for all, and to build a united front also in the context of Hormuz, of saying, not with us, you will not extort us, and you will not threaten us. Here are our capabilities. We will get rid of the mines that you're planting, and we will ensure that passage stays free. I have no doubt that with a united front of free countries, this would be possible to tackle. It's a shame that that hasn't happened, and it's a shame that we hear voices from Europe of organizing militarily, regardless of the US operations.
Thank you, Dr. Mary. Thank you so much for joining me from Israel on this issue.